So now we're moving to spread number 2 of the Croptoberfest 2023 project recipe. This one is really fast. Here is our cutting guide. For spread number 2, we need this 12-inch by 1.5-inch piece from designer paper number 1, and we will use all of designer paper number 2. We'll cut it at 5.5 inches, again at 5.5 inches by 12, and we'll have a 1-inch by 12-inch piece that we'll also use. Now the layout instructions call for 2 different background papers, but I'm going to use the same background paper, and I'm going to use this wood grain from the shiplap paper collection, and I'm going to use this blue from the Gem Tones pattern collection. I also will bring in, for those 1-inch by 12-inch and 1.5-inch by 12-inch, I'm going to bring in one more piece of paper. It may be something I pull from my scraps. So now that we know that we'll need a 1-inch by 12-inch strip, a 5.5-inch by 12-inch strip, another 5.5-inch by 12-inch strip, and a 1.5-inch by 12-inch strip. I'm going to cut the 2 5.5-inch by 12-inch strips from this blue paper. Now I want to show you where the 5.5-inch mark is. Actually right up against this edge, not this edge. You can barely see the little line here. Creative Memories does have a new 12-inch trimmer on the way, and it may already be available by the time this video is published. I can't wait to get my hands on it. Okay, we're going to cut 2 5.5-inch strips. Now the instructions say use this 1-inch strip, use the back side of it. Well, I'm very fortunate because I did find that I had another piece of this in my scraps. And so I'm going to cut a 1.5-inch piece with this, and I'm no longer going to use this gold piece. So now 1.5 inches. And I'm using the right hand side to measure. And now I have all the pieces to make this layout. So our instructions say that on the left we're going to put the 1-inch piece in one of the 5.5-inch wide pieces. And then on the left side we'll put the 1.5-inch piece. And then a 5.5-inch piece. And this is just the basis of the layout design. It is vertical bands of paper. And you can do all measure of things with this, but this is the unclad project recipe. Now the instructions called for a couple of embellishment, a notched banner here and a notched banner along here. And those are just ways to use the little slivers of paper that were left over from the other cutting. Next, I'm going to put a photo configuration down that is in the project recipe, but of course, I'm going to put my own photos on before this is over. This is basically the configuration from the project recipe. It has you cut out several 4x6 mats and then put 3.5 by 5.5-inch photos on those mats. Right now, I'm just putting 4x6s in the spots where it calls for them, and then it also shows 4x4 photos. But one thing I also noticed was that the project recipe does not call for any stickers, any border stickers. I've got a feeling I'm going to punch some border stickers before this is over. Now my next step is going to be to adhere the papers down and probably plan on my decoration before I put my photos on. I've put my photos on the page in the way I want them to go, and I think I want them to be matted. However, instead of matting them individually, I've decided I'm going to make 4 blocks to put these photos in. So on the left, I'll have 2 blocks of 4, and on the right, I'll have 2 blocks with 3 photos on it. I'm about to audition the black cardstock and the bright white cardstock to see which one of these would my photos look the best on if I use them to be the matte. I think what I can do, I'm going to take these, kind of put them on here like this. Then I'm going to take these and put them on here like this. For me, it's the white. The white lifts them off the face of the page. The white is going to help my photos to stand out. So I'm going to mat all my photos on white blocks. I definitely want to add a little more decoration to the edges of my page. So I'm going to use the Sunrise Scallop Border Maker cartridge. And I'm going to cut 2, one for the left page and one for the right page. Now, I'm going to cut this off, but I'm going to just feed this other side into the border maker system and cut both sides at the same time. I'm going to cut my scallop off on the right side of my trimmer, and I'm cutting it at just about 5/8 of an inch. I'm going to be in between the 1/2 inch line, but farther to the left of the 3/4 inch line. I felt that 3/4 was too wide and 1/2 was too narrow, so I'm trying to, as they say, split the difference and go in the middle. Now, because these two are going to be so far apart on the layout, if I don't get the left side and the right side at exactly the same width, it's not going to matter. Nobody's going to pull out a pair of calipers to measure exactly how wide my little borders are. Yes, I like that very much. And we'll spin this around and do the same thing. We're going to get it just in between the 1/2 inch and the 3/4 inch line. So now I'm going to put my white borders here to dress up my page, here and here. And I'm using the remainder of that same bright white cardstock that I matted with. And that tiny bit of decoration just made all the difference in the world on this page. Now, typically, I would like to see some kind of a shelf on the bottom of my layout, but the left and the right side are quite a bit asymmetrical. No two of these 4 mats are the same size. I didn't want to mess with the photos to try to make everything a uniform size. I'm just going with my photos the way they were, and I'm actually very pleased with this. We have gone from here to here. We've made quite a few changes, but the overall base design is the same. The biggest difference is the photos, but we each have our own photos, so we should never be driven to make our photos the same as in the project recipe. The project recipe shows a decoration right here and a little bit right there. I'm probably going to put a tiny amount of something up here and put a larger decoration here in this corner. Remember, we just used a 1-inch strip, a 5.5-inch strip, another 5.5-inch strip, and a 1.5-inch strip, all 12 inches tall. That was a fast layout, very repeatable, a lot of fun, and works for so many different types of photos. And just before the close-ups, I hope you'll give the video a thumbs up like, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment if you're going to try this unclad project recipe, and YouTube says, here's another video that you might like. So I hope you'll watch it.